Be a good announcement for the government. $1.9 billion, 810 extra prison beds, 685 extra frontline correction staff, money for rehabilitation, pay rises for existing staff. But the tough on crime rhetoric got lost in a soft on details train wreck of a press conference. Take a look.
The 810 new beds, are they on top of the 500 that are already being built at Waikeria?
No, that's an addition. So we're going to, at Waikeria, we'll have 600 beds that will come online at the middle of next year, and then there'll be an additional 220 beds that come on with the new wing. That's an additional 400 beds that are coming online inside the system.
So how many total are going to be at Waikeria Prison?
So there'll be 820.
So not in addition to what's already there?
810, sorry.
All of Waikeria total is going to be 810 beds?
Yes, correct.
Where's the... That's fewer than are there at the moment, isn't it?
No. Waikeria hasn't been delivered. Waikeria will be delivered middle of next year. And yes, you're right, it's about 500 beds plus a specialised mental health unit of about 100 beds, which will be delivered the middle of next year.
But that will now be 810.
Yes, because we've committed to the full expansion of Waikeria. Right. We'll be delivering 610 in May.
So what is the current capacity of Waikeria Prison?
So at the moment, the Waikeria Prison hasn't been delivered. So it won't have...
There are prisoners at Waikeria right now, aren't there?
So that's the old prison. I'm talking about the new prison. I'll have to check on those numbers.
So is that old prison still being decommissioned, or are you keeping it open?
Well, again, that's a decision for corrections.
What the total number of beds at Waikeria is going to be once you add this 800?
Well, we're adding the 810 additional beds with the new facility in Waikeria. The rest of the network, that's a decision for the CEO of Corrections. How
much is that extra 200 beds going to cost?
Well, I mean, I can't give you a number now because it's commercially sensitive.
It's budget.
No.
Because we've got a prison build up and running, and it's commercially sensitive.
They're under negotiation at the moment, so that it covers the delivery of the 600 beds next year and the additional 210 on top of that. We're going to deliver an additional 810 beds at Waikeria, which we think is going to, without a doubt, will meet the capacity needs of the approach that we're taking to public safety in our country.
So that corrections announcement needed a whole lot of its own corrections, which were emailed out by press secretaries afterwards. Joining us now to hopefully get the record straight is Prime Minister Christopher Luxon. Thank you very much for your time there. Some pretty confusing numbers that you would have heard there. I'm well, thank you. Hope you're well as well. 810 new beds, or 600 beds, 220 beds, 820 beds, 500 beds, 100 specialist beds, 610 beds. But in May, can you please clarify the situation? What is the announcement?
Yeah, look, what's happening there is there's 455 beds there currently. There's 600 beds that will be added next year, and there's a further 810 beds in the announcement of yesterday, which means that you'll end up with Waikeria with capacity for over 1,800 beds in total once we finish that development. What's exciting about that development is it's $1.9 billion of money being spent on corrections, and that is really to make sure that we get more corrections officers, make sure that we actually can pay them well with pay increases. We do the expansion of Waikeria, but also importantly spend almost $80 million rehabilitating what are called remand prisoners and making sure they get access to rehabilitation services much earlier than they would. So, yeah, it's a really good package for us to actually be making sure that we're doing our part in restoring law and order. Of course, we've got some major challenges. We've got a lot of work to do in that space. This is one part of that.
So what you just said then, the way you explained it, was awesome. I mean, that's a great announcement for you and your government. Why couldn't you do that yesterday?
Well, look, we got a bit mixed up yesterday. We had a quick chat after the press conference, and Mark clarified it very, very quickly. But as I said, you know, it's 810 additional beds on top of the 600 coming next year, on top of the 455 that are already there. Yeah, I mean,
and do you wonder how it went so wrong yesterday? Did you not prep beforehand?
Well, we had a quick chat afterwards, and Mark very quickly clarified it immediately afterwards, just to make sure everyone was clear about it. But what's important here, as you well know, Lloyd, is we're wanting to restore law and order. We've had a number of actions already about getting our laws ready to, crack down on gangs. We're making sure that we're coming with our serious young offender and our military academies with some of the support that young people are going to need through that. We've got a lot of work to do in terms of recruiting 500 extra police officers, plus this package here for corrections. So all of those things are things that we're doing pretty quickly within 161 days to make sure that we start to deal with what was been 6 years of soft on crime approach to law and order.
Have you had a bit of a word with the spin doctors or the press secretaries who gave you the briefing before that press conference?
Oh, look, we just had we had a quick chat with Mark immediately after the press conference. He clarified the statements immediately, and we've actually got good clarity around what we've got going on there. The important thing is the announcement, and the announcement is $1.9 billion going into corrections to make sure that we're actually setting up with good corrections, recruiting corrections officers, making sure they're paid well, expanding prison capacity, and importantly, giving prisoners rehabilitation support.
Yeah, and I agree that it is a good announcement, but you didn't actually manage to announce it properly, and it just looks as though the wheels are coming off the bus.
Absolutely not. Just a bit mixed up in the moment, but clarified very quickly. And importantly, what we're doing is working incredibly hard to restore law and order in New Zealand.
Do you agree with Bill English, who said, I think it was in 2012, that prisons and building new prisons are a moral and fiscal failure?
Yeah, I do actually, but the point is that what's also a failure is actually having crime happen in our country like it has been. We've got gangs that have grown by 51%, we've got violent crime up 33%, we've had a doubling of retail crime, there's been a huge amount of increase in almost a quadrupling of ram raids. That is utterly unacceptable, and what you have to look after is make sure that New Zealanders feel safe in their homes, their businesses, their communities. That's job number one. Of course, we've got to work on the long-term causes of crime. That's why we've got money invested there on getting remand prisoners actually rehabilitation services. That's why we're very, very focused on bringing our social investment thinking to life. You'll hear more about that later on. But what I'd say to you is, we make no apologies for actually making sure at this point in time we need to be very tough on crime, and where we are with violence and crime levels as they are is utterly unacceptable in this country.
And I guess you need somewhere to put them once you've caught them. Let's move on to the report that came out from the OECD yesterday. It said you cannot borrow for tax cuts. Can you give us your word now that you're not going to?
Absolutely. What we've said from the beginning is our tax relief will be fully funded. We've found savings, we've actually found new revenue to raise that, and as a result, we're not borrowing for tax relief. And also, that's the least inflationary pathway. What was good in that report was a lot of the things that we're focused on to grow our economy, making sure we have a world-class education system, embrace science, technology, get rid of the red tape, have more competition in the markets, international connections to the world, modern, reliable infrastructure. All of those things are the things that we're working on for long-term growth of New Zealand. So yes, we've got a job to do to get inflation under control. That's our short-term priority, and our long-term priority is working out how we grow this economy and make it much more productive so we're fundamentally all wealthier.
So in the budget that comes out in a few weeks, will you be borrowing at all, or is it going to be we're living within our means?
Well, again, what you're going to see is a budget where we're going to be a government that can't just undo 6 years' worth of economic mismanagement and vandalism in one budget. But what we can do is what good governments should be able to do, which is get rid of wasteful government spending.
Yes, are you borrowing though? Are we borrowing at all? I know the list that you're going to spout off here, but are you going to be borrowing in this budget? Because if you are, then isn't that essentially borrowing for...
No, as we've said, our tax relief package has been fully funded. We've said that right from the beginning. If you remember, before the campaign, we talked about how we're going to raise revenue, how we're going to reprioritise, and how we're going to generate savings. Because we want working New Zealanders to have tax relief. They haven't had it for 14 years. Inflation's gone up, I think, over 40% at that period in that time, and frankly, they deserve it. So we can deliver tax relief. We can deliver, good, responsible government spending that protects our frontline services, and importantly, we can deliver good infrastructure and a growth plan for New Zealand going forward. So
are we borrowing in this budget?
We're putting ourselves on.
Are we borrowing
again,
in this budget?
Wait to the budget. So you'll see it all on May the 30th. And as you know, we're going through the budget process right now. It's difficult for us to talk about that until the budget, but not long to go.
Can we talk about educational achievement? Because this came up in this report as well, and we've just spoken to Cameron Baggery about this, and it is linked to productivity. Yep. So we have bad educational achievement right now. In 10 years' time, that's going to affect our productivity by around 4 to 5%. So that is bad news, right?
Yeah, it is, and that's one of the 5 things that we've got to focus on, improving the economic productivity of New Zealand. And that's why you've heard us declare, first and foremost, we want 80% of our kids at school 90% of the time. And the second thing we want is we want 80% of our kids heading into high school actually at the curriculum. Today it's at about 50%. That's why you saw last week, Erica Stanford and I announced structured literacy. That is going to be mandated as the one way we teach reading across this country to all of our kids. That's why you've seen us institute an hour of maths, reading and writing. That's why you've seen us ban mobile mobile phones. That's why you've got a curriculum refresh going on this year, and you'll have more curriculum work happening. We need a knowledge-rich curriculum that teaches the basics well, that is teacher-instructed, so that we set our kids up for success. Because you're right, Lloyd, that's the problem, right? If we can't get our kids educated better than us, so they can access those higher-paying jobs that are there in the economy, we have higher-paying jobs, we have a bigger economy, it means we can afford better public services. So that's exactly what we're all about. You know, if we can get a world-class education system in place, and I've been talking about that since I came to politics because it's been the most alarming thing that I've seen, we've got to be able to do that, because otherwise we've got some economic problems in the future, we've got some social problems in the future without dealing with that.
And I think most Kiwis would agree with you. I agree on you as well. Another thing the report talked about were monopolies, and that's holding back our productivity as well. This is the duopolies that we've got in our supermarket. Air New Zealand essentially having a monopoly across the regional network as well. And it says that the government should or could adopt a strategy of gradual escalation of intervention. So is that something your government would look at, as intervening in a similar way to they did in Chorus in 2004?
Well, what you're saying is, you know, there is another bucket of work which is really around how we manage our regulation. We want smart regulation so that markets do operate effectively and competitively. We don't want red tape, which is a whole bunch of regulation and law that's not adding value. But you're right, we also want to see more competition, and you've seen that again in the last few weeks. You know, if you take just building products, for example, it costs, you know, 50% more to build a house in New Zealand than it does in Australia. Our building costs are up over 41% in the last 5 years. And so what we've said is, look, if we've got building products sitting in other jurisdictions like Australia, like other like-minded countries in New Zealand that have similar or higher standards of building codes, let's take products from those markets as well. That puts downward pressure on building costs, and as a result we get a lot more competition happening in that marketplace. So there's a whole series of actions that we need to do to improve and increase competition in the markets, make sure we get rid of red tape and regulation that's not giving certainty and driving just cost and compliance and inefficiency into businesses, and also while still maintaining smart regulation. That's why we've got David Seymour set up as a Minister for Regulation for exactly that reason.
Just on the Ponsonby shooting, have you had a briefing on that, a new briefing this morning?
Look, I mean, firstly, I just want to acknowledge what a tragic set of circumstances for the family involved, but also for those that will have witnessed that event. Obviously, it's an ongoing police matter. Can't talk too much further about that. But, you know, it's again a reason for why, you know, we really need to have serious consequences for serious offenders. And, you know, we are working incredibly hard with the gang laws, with the young serious offenders, with this announcement on corrections, certainly the 500 extra police officers we want to recruit, Section 27 reports, 3 strikes, all of that to try and get us into a place where we understand there are rights and responsibilities to being a citizen of New Zealand, and we need to make sure that we are going to restore law and order in this country.
Appreciate your time this morning, Prime Minister. That is Prime Minister Christopher Luxon.